Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited and very honored to present to you a warrior who has made the plight of the Assyrian Christians of Iraq his own. Ken, welcome to the American Mesopotamian Organization's Usher radio program. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on, Juliana. It's a pleasure.
It's an honor. It's an honor for me. Ken, you and I, along with the members of the American Mesopotamian Organization, have worked together in the past, and you've been a beacon of light for us in D.C., and we look forward to continue working with you.
I appreciate that.
Congratulations on this new endeavor. It's really exciting. But before we delve into that, I'd like to talk to you about your extensive work in Iran and Iraq. First of all, you have extensively worked in Iraq, and you're working on an important project also related to Iran, to Iranian freedom. Could you tell us a little bit about what brought you to be interested in working in the Middle East?
Well, that's a long story, Juliana, but let me take a crack at it. Many years ago, at the time of the Iranian Revolution, I was living in France, just starting off as a young reporter, and witnessing the revolution taking place in Iran. We were seeing, first of all, Ayatollah Khomeini, who was there in exile, and then once he went back to Iran, the first wave of exiles from the new Islamic tyranny started coming to Iran. So I began interviewing those new refugees, people who had fled the Islamic Republic of Iran for freedom. They understood very early on what Islamic government was all about, and they didn't like it. So starting there, I went to Lebanon in 1982, the first time as a war correspondent to cover the war in the summer of 1982. That was truly a formative experience, I must say. I went in there with a kind of liberal European worldview, thinking that the Israelis were doing horrible things to the Palestinians. And when I saw what was going on the ground, it completely changed me, completely changed my worldview, completely changed my understanding of the Middle East and everything else. And since then, I've understood that Israel is an embattled nation. It is the homeland of the Jewish people, but they are fighting a war of survival against very hostile neighbors. And the media here in the West in particular constantly falsifies information, falsely reports, misreports. A recent example of that, I was in Israel for the 2006 war in Lebanon. And the media here in this country was saying that the Israelis were committing aggression in Lebanon. I was sitting in a bunker with then opposition leader Bibi Netanyahu up in Kiryat Shmona in the northern part of Israel, with Hezbollah rockets crashing down all around us. And at that very moment, Representative Chris Van Hollen, who's the man I'm running against in the Maryland's 8th District this fall, he was writing a letter to the Secretary of State demanding that she put pressure on Israel to stop their indiscriminate bombing of Lebanese civilians. And I can tell you, the only indiscriminate bombing going on was ordered by Iran, carried out by Hezbollah, and the victims were Israeli civilians. So if you wish, in a nutshell, that long involvement with the Middle East has led me more recently, the past 4 years, to spend a lot of time in the Nineveh Plain in northern Iraq, and to learn about and try to help Iraqi Christians.
And with the current situation is making us really nervous between Iran and Israel. I don't know if you've seen this headline yet today, but the officials in Azerbaijan have arrested 22 people suspected of plotting attacks on the American and Israeli embassies in Baku, in the capital city, on behalf of Iranian regime. Also, Iran is rejecting the allegations that it has attempted to clean up radioactive traces left by the testing of the nuclear weapon in a military base. How do you see the Israeli-Iranian conflict, and what do you want to see America's role to be in the midst of all this?
Well, first of all, we need to understand that President Obama had a golden opportunity in June of 2009 to help the Iranian people, and he blew it. 3 million people were on the streets following a failed and pathetic excuse for an election in Iran, demanding to have their votes counted and to see a free and fair election. And they were on the streets calling on the United States to help them. And they asked Mr. Obama, are you with us or are you against us? And for 3 weeks, Obama said nothing. He remained silent. When he finally did comment 3 weeks later, he issued a statement which was devastating to the pro-freedom movement inside Iran. He said, we will not, in the United States, get involved in this because we have a long and bad history of meddling in Iranian domestic affairs. And that basically told the mullahs that he was with them, not with the people in the streets. So this administration bears a great deal of responsibility, in my view, for the tensions that have been rising between Iran and not just Israel, but the rest of the world. Look, the problem is the insistence of the Islamic Republic of Iran to build nuclear weapons. Their insistence to continue funding groups like Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda, let's not forget that, and terrorist groups inside Iraq, including groups that are murdering Iraqi Christians. The problem is the Iranian regime's refusal to behave like an ordinary government, an ordinary regime. That is the real problem. We need to help the people of Iran and get rid of the regime, not offer these new negotiations that Obama is trying to offer.
You are correct. Many of the Syrian Christians in Iraq have been killed via the funding of the Iranians, and Israel is surrounded by Hamas in Palestine and Hezbollah in Lebanon, and now Muslim Brotherhood, which is very close to the Iranian government in Egypt. So these are really important times we're living in. In addition to this, I'd like to talk to you about your thoughts on our dependency on the foreign oil. And as you're running for Congress, what are your thoughts? What are your policies that you want to implement in regards to the natural resources that are here in the United States?
Well, you know, it's a very good point. I'm glad you asked that question, because we have tremendous natural resources, energy resources in this country, and we refuse to develop them. We are the only country on the planet that refuses to develop its natural resources. We have natural gas, enough reserves of natural gas to last us probably for 200 years. We have enough oil and shale oil to last for at least 100 years, and we're not exploiting them. The recent decisions by the Obama administration not to build the Keystone XL pipeline, that is keeping us buying 1 million barrels a day from Saudi Arabia. Why should we be sending our money to Saudi Arabia instead of buying oil from Canada? The administration also refuses to drill offshore in Louisiana and Florida and Texas. That's another about 600,000 barrels a day. They refuse to exploit the resources in Anwar. Altogether, there's about a little over 2 million barrels a day of new oil, and this is not even counting natural gas, new oil that this administration refuses to exploit. Juliana, that amounts to about $80 billion a year. $80 billion a year that we're sending to the Saudis instead of investing here in American jobs. I think we can do an awful lot better. I think we have to lift the restrictions from the federal government so we can exploit oil, natural gas, shale oil, the whole gamut of what we have available while we invest in renewable energies. That's great. But there's not enough wind in Washington to keep the generators going.
And I'm sure your supporters will be absolutely cheering you on this. This is a very important issue for us in America, and also for the future of the American relations with the Middle Eastern countries. I personally believe if we cut the artery that funds Iran is going to help us on this war on terror.
Well, absolutely correct. And the oil sanctions that are slowly going into place will start to do that. But we had an opportunity to do that a couple of years ago, and Obama and his allies in the Congress refused to do so. It's a little late in the game to be doing it, but better late than nothing. I want to return just briefly to one thing that we were talking about earlier, and I didn't complete, about Israel and Iran. People believe that Israel will launch a military strike on Iran. I would just suggest that we think that we think with a little bit more imaginatively. Look at the Stuxnet worm that infected the Iranian centrifuge program. It probably destroyed about 1,000 of those uranium enrichment centrifuges and set back the program by 2 years. Look at the assassination of nuclear scientists. That seems to be having a deterrent effect. Look at the explosion at an Iranian missile plant on November 12th. That also seems to have had an impact. I wouldn't put my money necessarily on an Israeli military strike until they have exhausted every other possible means of disrupting the Iranian nuclear weapons program, because that's their goal ultimately. That is Israel's goal. They do not want to be on the short end or on the receiving end of an Iranian nuclear weapon, and I don't blame them.